This pot has started. So, thanks everyone for showing up. Thanks, Connie. Thanks, Amory. Thanks, Danielle. Thanks, Rachel. So, today we are going to pick up on the same train that Connie brought us on yesterday, which is the creativity train, which means I have nothing planned. We are going to be totally
Yay!
spontaneous. We are going to be totally creative today. So I am going to ask everyone to participate in this if you're watching this, whether on Facebook or on Zoom, and type into the chat, raise your hand, topics that you want me to cover. Otherwise, I am just going to launch and talk and see where we go, where we end up with all this. So today is all about random thoughts and random concepts. And we're going to see how that randomness synchronistically ties in to what's going on in the world today, in your life, and gathering what you can, leaving what doesn't apply to you. So please, 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 let's make this a participatory sport as we move into this. So the first concept that I really wanted to talk about is the concept of our thoughts and our beliefs are not things that we create. They are literally like radio stations that our brain tunes into. And just like flipping the dial on the radio, okay, we can tune into different frequencies. We can tune in to different types of information. But in reality, information and energy are omnipresent, meaning they are everywhere simultaneously. What we experience has everything to do with what we're focused and paying attention to and the level of energy that we are claiming. So a lot of us will get caught up and will use our thoughts and our beliefs as excuses to either do something or not do something, as if we are the thinker of thoughts and the creator of beliefs. But like I said, we are the experiencers of thought. We are the experiencers of beliefs. And since we have access to an infinite amount of thoughts and beliefs, this whole concept of, my thoughts are dragging me here, or because I believe this, I can't do this, or I have to do this, that's really a lie that we tell ourselves, because we have the ability to tune into whatever thought we want, whatever belief that we want to pick up and lay down. And everything in life is constantly changing. Okay. So, because everything in life is constantly changing, when we get stuck into a specific thought pattern or a specific belief that leads to a specific action pattern, what we're doing is we are giving away our power to change by focusing on the radio station rather than focusing on our ability to turn the dial, to tune in to something totally and completely different. And it's easy to get caught up into this lie that we tell ourselves. But when we do that, we're basically, like we talked about the day before, we are inviting more pain and more suffering in. And some of us may need that. Pain and suffering are not a bad thing. They are very uncomfortable by their nature, because they're the sign and signal that says, wake up. The station that you're tuned into is not an ideal station for you. It is not going to help you. It is not going to help those around you. And so when we are not adding to the field of existence, when we're not adding to our environment, we're not adding to the systems and the people around us, there's supposed to be a signal that says, hey, you're taking more than you're giving. There's an imbalance here. There's a sucking You literally suck. You're sucking the energy instead of using it efficiently so that energy can flow in and energy can flow out. So when we are tuned into the right radio station, there's a balance that can be achieved between receiving and giving. And that receiving giving balance, because everything in life changes, it's going to change throughout our day, throughout our life, throughout our year. There's going to be times when balance literally is about receiving more than we give for a period of time. There's going to be other times in which giving more than we receive is a balance. Okay, so balance does not mean totally and completely in the middle. Balance means the ability to seamlessly and effortlessly flow back and forth between the two extremes. The problem comes in is when we get stuck. Getting stuck in only receiving is just as bad and destructive as getting stuck in only giving, which is just as bad and destructive as getting stuck into this middle ground in where it's like it's supposed to be a complete fair exchange every single instant. And if you would look at your life as a whole, if you would look at existence as creation as a whole, yes, it does balance itself out, but it balances itself out in the whole expression. The individual moments, the individual expressions, sometimes they do not appear to be balanced. But again, this has to do with what radio station are we tuned into? How much energy do we have to process things? If we're choosing to process at a very low energy, we're only going to see this very, very minute little pinpoint. Okay. If we have a lot more energy, if we're in that super energy rich state, we can see things from much, much bigger and many more perspectives rather than just our physical perspective or just our mental perspective or just the future perspective or just the past memory perspective or just my family perspective. The more energy that we have, the more perspectives we can take. And the more perspectives we can take, the more we feel, the more we experience that things really are balanced out, that the universe literally is infinite, and our resources and our resourcefulness are infinite. But the lower energy level we choose, the more we decide, and this is just a decision, the more that we decide we are going to experience life as this one solid reality that can only be looked at from this one way, and my belief, my thought, that's the only thing that I'm going to choose to look at. The more we do that, the more we close down our perspective. The more we limit and close down our perspective, the more we drive the brain's processing deeper and deeper into the instinctual centers. And the instinctual centers are not about pleasure. The instinctual centers are about pain, because pain and fear and lack and loss, they can save your life in a survival situation. And if you're in a survival situation, it's the perfect place to have a singular focus: survive, 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 survive. But if you are not in a survival-based situation and you are choosing to do this either by not claiming your power or using your power to actually make this choice, either one, you're making the same choice, you're just using different strategies to make that same choice. So either one of those perspectives, either one of those tools that you use, when you choose to limit your perspective, you're choosing to reject the infinite abundance that's all around you and choosing to live in an experience of lack. There's not enough time. There's not enough resources. I don't have enough energy to make this change. It's going to require too much and I don't have enough. There's not enough finances. Everybody else is hogging it all. There's not enough for me. I need to hog it all. Therefore, there's not going to be enough. Anytime that we narrow our perspective, we choose to live in lack. And when we choose to live in lack, that's the experience that we're going to end up having. So when we choose to experience life from a much higher energy state, when we choose to acknowledge that our way of thinking, our way of believing is one way, And there's an infinite number of ways. And the more ways that we can hold simultaneously, the more we break out of that survival lack-based experience, and the more we start breaking into the abundance that is there for us if we would only choose it, if we would only be humble enough to let go of the belief that we are the thinker of thoughts, that we are the creator of beliefs, that our eyes, that our ears, that our sensations tell us about real reality. These are all lies that we tell ourselves. We know this from a scientific standpoint. We know that if you stimulate different portions of the brain electrically, you can have a totally different sight. You can have a totally different sound. You can have a totally different experience. And it has nothing to do with what's going on around you. You stimulate a certain portion of the brain, you could just start to see your aunt that passed away 25 years ago. It's like they're standing right there. I can actually see them. No, that seeing, that sound, that feeling is a creation in the brain. It is your creation. You are building the reality that you experience moment to moment. And so there is no old habits. There are no old patterns. There is only what you are creating in this moment, right here and right now. And because you're creating it in the moment, right here and right now, you have the ability to create something else if we would just choose it. If we would just break the habit of experiencing life in one way and limiting ourselves by saying this one way is what I'm going to continue to experience life as because blah, insert whatever excuse you would like to insert there. So our pain, our suffering, our ability to heal, our ability to move forward in life has everything to do with our ability to let go of what we're creating. And to do that, that requires first the acknowledgement, first the awareness of, oh my gosh, I'm feeling this. Okay. Second, acknowledging that experience. And third, accepting that we are the ones creating that experience. And we have the ability to create something totally different. So Connie says that that's one belief that I'm assuming this is the belief of lack, the belief of limited resources and resourcefulness. That is a very, very entrenched belief in our society. And so Connie says she needs to let that go. And I would say that everybody needs to let that go.
Well, what I was actually referring to was the scarcity mindset I've been trying to let go of for a long time. Like that definitely.
The belief in lack.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
But the one that really got me, which has been like a theme that comes up in my life a bunch, is like the idea of what balance is. Because we have this definition that we believe that balance is somehow in the middle, and that balance, like, you know, and you explaining that, saying that it's that ability to ebb and flow, really kind of, I don't know, it hit home for me really well, because I tend to be really extreme with stuff. And for a long time, I thought that that was like a negative trait of mine. But as I dig deeper and like get more just into life, I realized that's like one of my strengths, and that is the way that I balance things out. So that's a huge shift just in understanding what balance looks like.
Yeah, and that belief that balance is this one thing, that's a lack-based belief. That's a scarcity-based belief. It has to be this one thing. Instead of balance, I get access to everything in between the two extremes, including the two extremes. That's the abundance mindset. And we can tune into that radio station if we would just choose it. So, So in building onto that and going with this flow that we're talking about of abundance, a lot of people will really get caught up into the lack and the experience of limited amounts of energy. And this is something that is so ingrained into our society right here and right now, where we have to pay, we have to spend our resources on experiencing what nature, what God, what the universe gives all things for free. We are the only species that pays rent for space. We are the only species that uses our time doing all this other stuff in order to pay for things that literally come out of the ground and could be taken right out of the ground and put into our mouth. And we pay not only to have those things processed and packaged and delivered to us, but then we pay for putting it in our body, and then we charge ourselves with all of the beliefs and emotions that we have tied up into those resources. So this energy thing, this lack-based energy, our energy system that we have right now is based on petroleum for the most part, based on petroleum, and it's based on things that we can mine, including petroleum, out of the ground like coal. And there is a finite amount of that physically on the planet. And how long does it take to make oil naturally? How long does it take to make coal naturally? It's thousands and millions of years to make this. And if we really tune into what is the consciousness level, what's the frequency, what are the thoughts, what are the feelings around the basis of our energy system, it's very, very dark. I mean, it's very, murderous and destructive, and, rape, kill, and pillage, and wars are started over the petroleum, and land is taken away. And it's just really, really ugly, nasty stuff. Whenever we look around, and if we would break the habit of this is the only way that we can get our cars to move, we look around in nature and go, okay, what are all the different ways that we can move? The sun is this constantly giving free resource that's pouring down. And whenever we're looking at biology, when we're looking at how the system of life is set up, the system of life on this planet is a solar based system. And we forget about that. We many times will get caught up into this food, this bound energy. How long does it take for sun to hit the ground and for those microbes to develop and to then evolve and then to create this seed, which creates this plant, and that plant comes to maturity, and then that maturity ends up bringing in fruit, and then we learn about that fruit and figure out how to make that fruit use it. Like, how long does that process take? And in reality, we get caught up into thinking that's the only way that our body will get energy, is by putting that bound energy that took a long time to get into this shape or form that we are used to, and then putting that in our body. But when we're studying the anatomy and the physiology of the body, what we recognize is that most of the fuel, most of the cellular mechanisms in our body, the little bitty microscopic machines, they run on a single molecule. That molecule is called ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And what our machines in our body do is they break one of those phosphate bonds. And as that bond is broken, it releases energy, which then turns the molecular machinery. It turns the molecules so that our molecules can act in a specific way. And the average human body generates on its own. It recycles. It takes that extra phosphate and it attaches it back inside of our mitochondria. Okay, the average human body creates 440 pounds of a molecule. Now, that's a lot of molecules to create a pound, much less 440 pounds. So this concept that we have.
What amount of time does it create that?
In a day.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. So this concept that we have of the limitations of energy not only do we have that belief about our bodies and ourselves, but we have this belief, and that spreads. And probably because we have it about ourselves, it spreads out into into our projections on the environment. And we look out in the world and we go, oh wow, energy is something that has to be created over time, and then it has to be broken down, and it has to be refined, which is literally what we do with the food in our body. And then, later on we can put it into our machinery, and it'll start to run in our machinery. But again, that's not really true. That's one truth. That's one way of looking at things. Yes, you can make a car run on gasoline. Obviously, look around. But there are an infinite number of ways of doing things differently. And this includes in our body. However, it's going to be a challenge to reach up and turn that radio station of our thoughts and our beliefs into something different if we don't have enough energy to do that. So recognize that your ability to gain free energy, your ability to fuel your cells in order to create something totally different, is based on three things. Okay. Are you hydrated? Are you drinking enough quality water to surround the mitochondria in a layer of specially designed water built in the body called easy or effective zone water, which is actually a fourth state of matter? We all know solid, liquid, and gas, but easy water is much closer to a plasma, which is a fourth state. Okay, so do you have the right type of water in your system? Number two, are you receiving grounding from the negative ions that are flowing up into the earth, so that you're like a lightning rod and all that energy can come in and it automatically comes in and dissipates into where it's supposed to, rather than coming in and creating some sort of explosion or fire or useless expression of energy? As far as the body goes, I mean, fire is very useful in other ways. But number three, so there's water, hydrated, grounded outside. And then number three, are you receiving enough direct sunlight? Are you charging the cells of your body? Are you charging the iron in your body? Are you magnetizing that iron with the photons that are coming in? Those three components: well hydrated, outside, grounded, skin to the ground. We were born naked without shoes. We walked around without shoes and for the longest amount of time. And then again, we were outside in direct sunlight to experience all of the different spectrums of sunlight throughout the day and throughout the year. If we are not doing these three things, we are limiting ourselves in our ability to tune the radio station into something else. And this requires no effort on our part. All we have to do is be outside.
I have a question.
Yes.
I know someone, well, like their whole family, they're like diagnosed, whatever, so they're labeled as being allergic to the sun. And
Correct.
their skin will do some crazy stuff when they go out in the sun. Is
Yes.
that like a generational thing that's been passed down in DNA because so many generations didn't get enough sunlight that it
Oh, no, it's not so many generations didn't get sunlight. Somewhere along that family line, okay, there was an experience from one of their ancestors that locking down, that playing small, that receiving very, very little, staying out of the spotlight was the best way to survive. Okay. And that got taken and it got turned into a specific genetic pattern that created specific proteins. And so now, even though that they have a lot of other patterns, they have a lot of other ways of making programs, as long as that pattern, as long as that informational habit using energy in the same type of way, as long as that pattern or habit is in their their psyche, in their subconscious, the more of those same types of proteins they're going to be using to build their body. And that's going to create the same type of thing over and over and over again. So really, it's going to be doing some epigenetic changes with that entire family in order to get that response to change. But in the meantime, okay, getting them exposed to very, very short, but very, very frequent exposures to the sun. So maybe like 2 to 3 minutes, but doing that like 25 times a day. That would be the way to do that. And then to also recognize that sunlight comes into, this is the most photosensitive part of our body. So they don't necessarily have to expose their entire body while they're continuing to produce this genetic pattern, which is producing those specific sequence of proteins. They could just expose just their eyes to the sun, 25 times a day for a couple seconds at a time. So there's a lot that can be done, but each one of us is unique. Each one of us has to feel this out for ourselves.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because there's like 3 siblings, and the one sibling that like broke away from the family, not intentionally, but she didn't do that playing small things. She was like really, really loud and vibrant and kind of like the black sheep. She can handle sunlight.
Yes.
Um,
And I love what you just said, Connie. She's loud and she's vibrant,
yeah.
which is the opposite of the rest of the family. So again, at some point in history, this got, it was a belief system that the cells of the body picked up, is that if we are out in the spotlight, if we are expressing, if we're fully receiving, that somehow is going to lead to some sort of life-threatening situation.
Can we talk more about epigenetics? Because that's like super interesting.
Yes, we'll talk more about epigenetics in just a second. I'm going to allow Amory to talk. What you got, Amory?
Hey, so my family is pretty allergic to gluten,
Uh-huh.
and I've always just kind of ignored it. It's not anything that'll kill me, so I just, I go back and forth and pretty much do whatever. But my oldest daughter had terrible reactions. I mean, it was so bad. She was covered in rashes. She was emaciated. She looked sick. Her body was just totally revolting. So she quit gluten, got her body healthy, and then she decided that that wasn't a reality that she was willing to subscribe to, and just decided that she was not allergic to gluten, and she lives her life as though she's not allergic to gluten. And it's been about 2 years now since she made that choice, and she's healthy and totally fine. She hasn't had a reaction to it. She just decided that she wasn't going to believe that anymore. It's really cool.
Yeah. And that whenever we make a decision to change a belief, we start behaving differently, and that trains our body differently. And then that leads to a totally different response. So I want to just make everybody aware that changing a belief is the first step into experiencing something different. But changing a belief is not the only step that needs to be taken. We can't just sit in our house and think happy thoughts all day long and expect life to get drastically different. There's behaviors, there's actions, there's feelings, there's thoughts. All of this stuff is going to change and needs to be changed, but that's after we take that first step in saying, I am no longer going to perceive life as this one objective reality. I am now going to experience it as much, much broader, and giving myself the ability to make much more changes. Hang on just one second. Okay, so we are going to actually tie in gluten sensitivities and allergies to epigenetic changes, because this, at this point in history, is becoming much more of an epigenetic thing, and that's where we're starting to see a lot more of this. So number one, really the only people that truly have gluten sensitivities are going to be people that have celiac disease. Now, I am not saying that gluten has a positive effect on everybody. You can not have celiac disease and feel like crap when you eat gluten, but there's a totally different way that that gluten sensitivity actually gets developed in non-celiac people. Okay, for us right now, okay, we don't have, as a society, a gluten sensitivity problem. We have a pesticide and overuse of chemicals in our food system. Okay. And I'm not going to name this by name, but there's a very, very popular pesticide. It is the most popular. It is in our water supply. It is covering just about all crops, whether they're organic or not, because it blows in the wind and it changes and it gets incorporated into a lot of the gene. It's been literally programmed into the genes of some of these plants. But what this pesticide does is it actually causes the stomach of insects and pests to rupture. It causes their stomach to explode. Okay. Now we, being the super smart species that we are, is like, oh, okay, well, that will only affect insects. Yuck, yuck, yuck. And then we start putting it into our body. Well, guess what it does to our digestive tract? Now we have a much bigger digestive tract, and it's formed very differently. So it's not going to cause it to explode, but it literally causes the cells that create the lining of our digestive tract to kind of shrivel up. And as they shrivel up, they start to come apart. Okay. And this is what's called like kind of a leaky gut type syndrome. Because when those cells come apart, what that gives access to is it allows larger molecules than are supposed to slip in between the gaps in those cells and to literally get deeper into the body and into the bloodstream. Now, these large molecules, every time that we eat something, okay, our body breaks that down into the smallest component that it possibly can. And that's why we have this really long digestive tract. Our small intestines can stretch for miles. Okay. So we have this because as it's going down and as these molecules are soaking in all these enzymatic gastric digestive juices, these molecules are breaking down smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And the smaller we can get that molecule, the better off it is, because as that gets incorporated, now we're pulling in pure building blocks. So it gives the body this access to having a massive amount of different things that it can do because it's working with the smallest components of these molecules, and it can build whatever it needs to after that. But when a large molecule enters into the bloodstream, enters into a portion of the body that it's not supposed to be in, the immune system gets triggered and it starts to attack this molecule. If we can't break it down in our digestive system, then we're going to need to break it down with our immune system. And this is not really the way that it's supposed to go. So the worse and worse, the holier and holier, and the more gaps that are in our digestive system, the more the larger molecules are able to sink in, the more the body gets trained to start attacking these molecules. Okay. And gluten is a very, very sticky molecule. So it is kind of a challenge for the body to break down. So because we have so much of this pesticide and we've been using it for so long, and so many people's bodies have gotten into a habit of breaking down this molecule gluten in a very, very unnatural and unhealthy way, overstimulating the immune system. This is literally what we're passing down genetically, the information to our kids. Whenever a mother gets pregnant, she passes down the information about how she's living at this current moment to her children. Okay, so in the 80s, whenever these, pesticides became super, super popular, and this became, kind of the staple, on top of all the genetic modification that we have been doing to the wheat plant itself, all mothers' bodies have been passing on the information to their children that the normal way to use and break down this molecule is with your immune system rather than your digestive system. Okay. And the information on how we used to break down wheat, that's still in our system. That's still in our genetic code. But that part of the genetic code has not been activated. The cell hasn't been convinced that it needs to go back into that library of how to create proteins, of how to create the molecular machinery based on what's needed in the moment. Okay. And the way that the cell decides what proteins, what molecular machinery, what ways of doing things are appropriate in the moment is based on how the outside wall of the cell is stimulated. Now, if anybody knows much about cells, what we're taught in school is that the nucleus of a cell is the brain, because that's where all the genes are. That's where all the information on how to build these proteins are. Okay. The problem with that analogy of the nucleus being the brain is that we can take the nucleus out of a cell, put that cell into a petri dish, and that cell will continue to do its thing. Okay, it'll continue to take in food. It will continue to express toxins. It continue to move. It will continue to change, and it can change with the information that it already has programmed into it. Okay, but because you took out the information library, it's not going to be able to make massive changes. Huge adaptations are not going to be able to be possible. But if you take a brain out of a human, there's no change. There's no living. There's no eating. There's no sex. All right, that's just Kaputski. So what we're kind of looking at right now is if the outer layer of the cell, if the membrane of the cell, if that is dissolved, the cell dies instantly. There's no way of interacting. There's no way of responding to what's going on in the environment. So in a sense, we're kind of, inverses of our cells. Our cells are these single organisms. We are a multi-organism complex. Our body has its main change mechanism, its main adaptive mechanism, which is the brain and the spinal cord, at the core, at the inside of it. Cells have their brain on the outside. Okay, the cellular membrane. So by stimulating that membrane differently, that stimulates the cell to create different proteins, to build itself in totally different ways, which gives it totally different ability to respond to life. Okay, so a lot of times whenever we say, oh, this runs in my family, okay, what that really means is that we are programming ourselves. We are giving ourselves the exact same environment mentally, emotionally, physically, chemically as our parents and our grandparents. And because we're giving ourselves the same environment to respond to, the cells are responding in the exact same way. So number one, the first step to creating what's called an epigenetic change, which means you change your genome, you change your gene expression, is to first let go of this belief that you are this one way and that's the way that it is, that life is this one way and that's the way that it is. Let go of that pigeonhole, let go of that box that you have put yourself into, so that you open up the potential for having totally different experiences. And it's experiences, not thoughts. It's experiences that change the way that our body functions. But the best way to create the same experience, which is creating the same function in your body, is to continue to go off the same thoughts and feelings that you have been in the past. Okay, I don't believe that I can make this change. Well, that's a great way to not make a change. So when we are analyzing, when we're looking at our abilities, okay, our abilities to make change is almost infinite. Okay, now the amount of time that takes, the amount of resources that take, that is, a totally different topic. But we can create a massive amount of change, and we need to change. The first step is that belief. Okay. So let's see. Barbara said that we mentioned being humble to acknowledge of we are not the thinkers, we are not the creators of belief. Can you explain that more? Are you saying that we are not the creators, but we can still choose from them? Absolutely. Okay. So Barbara, energy can never be created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed. It can only be used in different ways. So the way that we use the energy and information at our disposal, that's where our creative power comes from. Okay. But we cannot create energy. We cannot create a thought. It's already out there in the field. We can just tune into it. Okay, so there's a really, really interesting study that was done in the late 90s, and it was done on this concept of free will and how much free will, what is free will? Where is our ability of our brain to just decide that it's going to do something and then go ahead and act on that decision? Okay, and so what this scientist did is he basically hooked up all these grad students to electrodes. And he would have a clock going on around, okay? And the person would decide that they're going to push a button at a specific time, okay? And what they found was that the body was actually geared up. The body was in the process of making that motion somewhere between 1/10 and 1/100th of a second before that person chose to decide. Okay, so what that means is there's so many influences around in our body and in the environment around us that push us in a specific direction. Okay, if we just go on our instincts, which most of us do because they have not taken that power, they have not taken that control, they have not taken that responsibility to heart. What happens is we recognize that the training that our body has undergone throughout our lifetime and throughout our ancestors' lifetime, the epigenetic expression, the way that those molecules and machines and microscopic machines in our cells are functioning right now, that's really determining most of the time what's going to happen. Okay, so our ability to choose what is possible is really limited to what our body is programmed with at the moment. Okay, but what he found was the brain and that person has the ability to, in a sense, veto that. Okay, the body starts to gear up, the body starts to engage, the body starts to get ready to press the button, and then that person experiences them deciding to press that button. Okay, but in order to change that experience, what we can do is say, no, I'm not going to press that button. And by not pressing that button, all of that energy, all of that machinery gearing up to go and press the button, when we veto it, because again, energy can never be created nor destroyed, that energy that's there, that potential that's starting to move, it gets shifted and it changes and it starts to be expressed through different parts of the brain that open up our ability to see more possibilities than just when we are going on the instincts. So this ability, this decision, this stage 4, I am no longer going to be victim to this belief. I am no longer going to be victim to this feeling, to this habit, to this pattern, to what other people are telling us. This drawing the line in the sand, this conscious veto. No, I will not do this. That opens the door for the cells of the body to start doing things differently, which then opens the door for us to be able to experience more options. So the challenge in this is to make that conscious veto choice before we get the understanding of what else is possible. If we are just waiting to feel that anything's possible, if we are just waiting to feel like I can do this, we are literally setting ourselves up for failure because it takes the conscious veto of no longer using our energy in the same way in order for the possibility of using energy in a different way can exist. Okay, so Barbara says that she was wondering in terms of systems, do we create them? Do we choose them? And it's kind of like I said, from what I just explained, it's kind of a combination of choosing to use what we have at our disposal differently. And by choosing to use what we have at our disposal differently, to choose to use that system in a different way, actually starts to change the way that the system is set up. So we do create new systems, but we create based on the old system. Okay, and we can see this in the expression of life itself. Babies don't just spontaneously pop out of thin air, right? They pop out of an already existing system, and in that, whenever babies come out, they are expressing everything that their ancestry, everything that their genes are handed down. And then as that child goes through life and they start to develop, they gather more information and they make unique choices in their life. And it's those unique choices that guide this system that comes as a perfect combination of the mother and father's genome. Okay, it guides that system into a brand new expression that's different than just the mother or just the father. Okay, although those influences are kind of always there. And yes, this is true for the individual, this is true for the cell, but this is also true for the entire collective as a humanity as a whole. So glad that's starting to make sense. Yes, not knowing what you're not willing to put up with anymore. That is the fork in the road. That is the choice point. That's the decision point. But again, if we're not willing to make that decision, then yeah, we're just going to keep experiencing the same thing. And remember, there's a lot of safety and security that comes along with experiencing the same thing, even if that same thing is pain. And as a matter of fact, Barbara, I believe you expressed this a couple days ago, and this is a beautiful expression that most of us experience, even though we may not acknowledge it, is we will very much get caught up into, if there's not something wrong, then something's wrong. When things are going too good, watch yourself. Whenever things are going really well, watch how quick you will tend to sabotage that. How quickly your mind will go into, oh, well, this is gonna end at some point, and oh, that's a bad thing, or what if this leads to something negative, or what am I gonna feel like after this is over, rather than really embracing and being with that amazing good thing that's happening for however long it is. But just watch, how long does it take for you to recognize how good things are going before those thoughts come in that start to sabotage it? Okay, is it seconds? Is it minutes? Is it hours? Is it days? All right, we can spread that time out, but that habit is ingrained in most of us very, very deeply. And again, this comes from a survival stance. Because in a survival situation, a dysfunctional known is always preferable to a unknown. Because in the unknown, there could be anything. So our body will go, okay, this is a dysfunction, but I know this dysfunction. I have management tools for this dysfunction. I have no idea how to survive the unknown. I have no tools in order to do that, unless we train the body, unless we train the body to embrace the unknown a lot more and a lot more. I am currently reading an amazing book that has a lot of tools and strategies to do this. And that book is called Soulcraft. It's around here somewhere. But this would be a book. Oh, here it is. See if that's a little bit backwards, I know, for most people. And the author is Bill Paletkin. I would highly, highly recommend this book for anybody who is really looking to make some super profound changes in their life, their experience of themselves, and their experience of the world around them. This was written by a PhD, I believe he was a psychologist. Yep, psychologist, and he's kind of one of the pioneers of like wilderness and nature based therapies, and it's just some amazing resources in this book, to really drop in and peel back all of those layers of crap that has been laid on top of who we are, preventing us from expressing what Bill calls like our soul level. So there's a one really cool concept in the book that he talks about, and this is initiation rites for Native peoples are really about digging in and peeling back and separating the individual from all of their safety structures, so that that real, unique, authentic expression comes up. And after these initiation ceremonies and rites, that person has a much better sense of who they truly are. But because we have been stripped away, those initiation rites have been stripped away. We don't really have any of them in our society. Women have a natural one that's built in, and that's the initiation rite of childbirth, where that woman, if she does natural childbirth, is forced into a position where she totally has to surrender to the process. There's no doing that can be done. It just is a complete, and because everything is stripped down in that very earthy natural process, I would say in our society, there's really only one rite of initiation that is widely accessible, and it's only accessible to women. But in this stripping down process, in this descending into the soul level process, this is the opposite end of the hero's journey from the ascent, or the spiritual pathway, or the pathway to spirit, in which we experience the connection to all. This is really what most religions and most spiritual people put their full focus on. The challenge becomes, because we don't have that descent, because we don't have the stripping away of everything that we're not. If we jump too fast into that ascent, okay, there's a lot of crap, a lot of fake crap, a lot of lies that we bring along into that oneness experience, and that ends up creating a very dysfunctional and unsustainable experience. Whereas if we approach that experience as the pure soul expression that we are, then merging the experience of that unique individual that we are, that soul expression, with the unity expression, now we have a full relationship. You cannot have a full relationship with only one part. Okay, we have to be the most authentic, the most raw and real expressions of ourselves in order to develop the best relationships. If we approach a relationship with any sort of fakeness, with any sort of role or mask or covering up or hiding, we are preventing that relationship from being a real relationship. And this is true with the relationship between us and ourselves. This is true between our relationship with us and others. And this is true with our relationship with the divine, or with spirit, or with the universe, or with God, or whatever label or classification you want to put onto this. So that descent process, that soul work process, that is a very necessary part of the process, but that's also been a process that has been very much vilified and demonized in our society and a lot of our religious expressions. So again, I'm going to highly recommend this book. It is called Soul Craft, and the name of the author is Bill Plotkin. Amazing book. And in some of this, I'm going to be working with someone very soon to create a course, to create almost like a book club. And we're going to do this online and partially, and we're going to do this in person partially, if we're allowed to gather again, if the government gives us permission to be real humans. We're going to create a group of people that are going to start to study, and we're going to start with the masculine, feminine nature, okay, and then we're going to kind of branch out from there into kind of more aspects of studying our authentic nature, so that we can strip away all of the BS that's been piled on top of us. So look out over the next month or two for the information on how to join that group, how to join that book club. That's going to be coming out pretty soon. So Barbara also said, glad these are making sense, Barbara. I love when the crap that comes out of my mouth makes sense. She says she noticed the last 2 weeks that the ebb and flow and moments that she got into sabotage. Awesome. When we do SRI, yes, SRI is an amazing, amazing opportunity. It's a doorway into just being totally honest with what is. And it's helped to get out of that sabotage. Awesome. And yes, just recognize the best way to get out of that sabotage is not really to stop it. It's just to acknowledge when you're doing it, because none of us want to sabotage it. So if we can catch all the little subtle ways that we sabotage ourselves, we're going to naturally start to stop doing that. Again, this is not something that you have to work hard at. Sorry to mess up your belief in struggle and hard work. So, coming up towards the end of our time together today, is there anybody else that has any questions, that has any comments? I hope that today my creative ramble babble was practical in your life. I hope that you saw some synchronicities in this, that you felt I was almost kind of speaking to you. I didn't have anybody in particular on mine. I didn't even have a topic on mine. So thank you, thank you, thank you for showing up. Thank you, Tasha, for showing up. I'm so, so happy that you saw this as perfect. Is there anybody else that would like to raise their hand or type anything into the chat? Is there anybody else over on Facebook land? Anybody else that, whoops. That, let's see. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Nope, that seems to be about it. So thank you everybody for joining. I have not told Connie this, so surprise, but I am going to have Connie kind of reach out to some people that have brought up concepts for doing a Seeds of Life. And tomorrow, what I would like to do is I would like to make this a group Seeds of Life. So I'm going to ask everybody that has reached out, everybody who's thought about reaching out, if you have any topics, if you have any skill sets that you would be willing to talk for maybe 5, 10, 20 minutes about and share some of the wisdom that you had. I know some people have talked about essential oils. I know some people have talked about Kundalini yoga. I know some people have talked about a few different things. So if you have anything that you would be willing to share, go ahead and study up on that tonight. Reach out to us either tonight, or you can just have your stuff ready and then you can just kind of raise your hand. You can email Connie. She put her email address in the link. It's connie.olc@gmail.com. Email Connie, email the Organic Living email site, and just let us know if there's a topic that you'd just be willing to talk about for just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and make this transition, since we only have a couple days left. Yay! In this stay-at-home order before things can start to go back to real life. And let's make this transition so that as we leave this experience, as we leave this time, this digital time together, we leave the necessity of meeting in this way, we can move forward into doing this in a much more community-based ways, so that we are processing all the information and we have access to everyone's brains. We're networking our brains this way rather than just relying on a few brains, either ourselves or mine or whatever else like that. So please reach out to Connie. Expect Connie to reach out to you. And if you don't hear from Connie, if you don't hear from us and you have something, even if you haven't told us, just brush up on it. Just come up with a couple talking points that that you think would be super, super interesting, and super relevant and really practical if people just knew this one or two things? Because in the future, what we want is we want these seeds of life to be much shorter videos, so that people can take them in just, a few minute chunks. But that one thing that we deliver that could plant a seed in someone's consciousness that could grow into something massive in the future. But what's that one thing that if someone could just start to chew on, if it could just get into their brain, that earworm, if it could just get in and start to make those changes, how could that one thing start to change the way that person views life? What is one perspective that we can add in so that all of us can start to move away from using this, limiting, suffering, pain-inducing way of going about our life, and have these multiple perspectives as a norm, because we're not really living in survival-based situations, regardless of what you hear on the news. Over 95% of the population is not going to experience any sort of life-threatening situation with what's going on. So for the vast majority of us, we don't need any of those instinctual centers right now. We don't need any of those survival-based mechanisms. And when we use those, it actually lowers our resistance and it increases our risk of being damaged. So it's really strange times that we're living, but these are the times in which making that choice is no longer an option. You are going to have to make a choice one way or the other, and choosing not to make a choice is still making a choice. So we are all either going to make a choice to become more resourceful and more energized and figure out new ways of doing things and changing, or we're going to make the choice to stay the same, which is a choice for death, destruction, chaos, pain, and suffering. Okay, so there's no longer any room for anybody to be sitting on the fence. All right, I love you all. I know, Tasha, there's certain things that I struggle with not wanting to change either. However, since change is the only constant in the universe, recognize that resistance and make a choice to make a change. All right, I love everyone. We will see you tomorrow, if not sooner.
Bye-bye. Get some sunshine.
Yeah.